You referring, you referring to?
To the library.
It looks like we're recording too. Okay. Okay.
Are we ready?
Whenever you want to go.
Okay, let's do this.
You can turn off this sound.
All right. I see some people have your masks. Some.
That's you down there. So that's you. So you know where you are in the window. Okay. There.
Some people do, some people don't. Well, I guess if you're by yourself, that would be perfect. But you know, we are in COVID-19, so please, utilize your mask and the prevention protocols as often as needed. So as you know, my name is Luke Camarillo. I am a registered nurse. I have a degree in nursing, in the science of nursing. I got my master's back in 2012. Now it's been a couple of years now. And begin that process late in my life. So for those who are starting early in recovery and are getting back on the right path, kudos for you. I would encourage you to continue on your path and really shoot for the sky. The only limits that you have is really the limits that we put upon ourselves, right? Amen to that. And those who are older, hey, I'm a testament to that if there's a will and a strong resolution, then you can still fulfill dreams and move into professions that you kind of wrote off early because of your age. Don't let age stop your perception, stop you from doing things that are important to you. Okay.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
So those who have your mics on, can you please turn them off? Right, beautiful. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So this is the format. I am going to present the material, and then at the end, about, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes or so, depending on how chatty I feel, then just type in, right?
Yeah.
No.
They can go. They
Write
can
it
go.
down.
They can lie. They can go live with you.
Yeah, write it down and at the end,
Yeah.
then we'll have those conversations.
Oh, okay, write it down, and then at the end, you can, turn your mics on?
Yeah.
And then,
And you just talk back and forth with them.
and then we will communicate that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. What we will be talking within the next couple of weeks are really is about infections and infections related to, at this time, really infections related to viruses. Virus is part of the group of small organisms called microbes. So we have viruses, we have bacteria, and we have fungi or fungus. These are called microbes. Now, here's the interesting thing about the microorganisms is that bacteria and fungus are bona fide or organisms. They are alive. They're just very small. Now, viruses really don't fit in that category. They are they're kind of like in a whole areas themselves, because they are, when they're in the body, they act as if they are alive, but outside the body they are, in a sense, dormant. They don't reproduce. They don't eat. They don't do any of that stuff. So they are almost like a sci-fi nanobot. I don't know, for those who like science fiction. In fact, we're moving towards that type of technology. They are really small, almost like machines, and they're only activated when they come in contact with the cell that they can latch onto. So, and they're very, very small. And as you know, they have they're very different types, and they also have the ability to what is called mutate. So one type can change a little, and by changing a little, it fools the host, and they can be reactivated again. So on some of these, you can build immunity, and some you can't. For example, the flu. The flu is a virus that mutates often, and in that mutation, every year, that's why we get a new version of the flu every year. Right? And the same with the cold. So as you see in my PowerPoint, let's first talk about my mustache. All right, it's kind of a 70s inspired slash COVID-19 slash Zapata inspired mustache. Now, I was told by more than a few that I am not allowed up without any facial hair. So my mask doesn't fit well with a beard or a goatee. So this is let's say my answer to the people who have to actually see me and talk to me. So hope you enjoy it.
It is a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at the PowerPoint first page. As you can see, I spent a lot of times in the designing of the font and the background. I thought I would go for like a Cold War East German type of utilitarian look. I figured it's there's nothing wasted if you print it. You're using the minimal amount of ink. So kudos to me for being very environmentally friendly. All right. Okay. So the in-service is called. We're going to talk about hepatitis. All right. So if we can move to the second page, we have the anatomy of the liver, because when we talk about the different diseases that affect that are called hepatitises, that refers to the liver. So as you see in the PowerPoint, we have the main players here. We have the liver and the stomach, and as you see, the liver is here's the rib cages here. The liver occupies around that much of your torso, and it gets really crowded in here. You have your lungs, you have your heart, you have your pancreas, you have your spleen, you have your liver, you also have your small intestines, you have your diaphragm, your large intestines, and they're all crammed in there, folks. In the backs are the kidneys, and the liver says, you know what? I'm going to take almost, gosh, a large portion of the insides. And there's a reason why the liver is as large as it is. So we have the liver here, our stomach is here, our lungs, our heart, and as the stomach moves into the small intestines, the liver plays a part in digestion as well. So it's a main player. In fact, it's such a big player. There's only a few organs that we cannot live without. They've done with an artificial heart. They have dialysis for kidneys, but we haven't found a replacement for the liver at this time. As you see, from the picture, there are really two parts to the liver, and the liver has it's one of the few organs that can actually grow back. So you can lose a part of your liver, or you can donate a part of your liver, and that can actually grow. So that's fantastic news for us. So you see there the liver, the stomach, and kind of behind the stomach is the pancreas as well. The little green thing is the gallbladder, and that comes into play. We'll talk about that later. Also, what is important here in this picture is called the hepatic artery. That is the vessels that feed the liver itself. And then you have the hepatic portal, and everything you digest comes through that and into the liver, and the liver does its thing with incoming nutrition. Okay, next slide number 3. The liver has over 500, folks, 500 functions and counting. That's how important it is. So what I have done here is I have put down just a handful of some of the functions that the liver does for us. And these ones are going to play into when I get to the end, to the last slide, which is on cirrhosis and the manifestation of end-stage liver disease and how it manifests in the body. So when we look at some of the functions here on the slide, I will tie them in later on in the presentation, okay? So let's just look at some of the things that it does. First of all, the liver is reddish brown in color, and that seems to be almost universal with mammals. The liver always is dark that way. In us, it weighs about 3 pounds. It holds about 1 pint of blood, about 13% at any time. So at any time, 1 pint of blood is in the liver. Now, for those who are adept in mathematics, you look at 1 pint of blood equals 13%. So if somebody at some point could tell me how much blood then is in the circulatory system at any one time, all right? If 1 pint of blood equals 13%. Okay, it also produces bile, and bile assists in removal of metabolic waste and the breakdowns of fat in the small intestine. This is important to understand because that's going to play a role later on in part of the diagnosis of liver disease. It produces proteins needed in the blood, and we'll come back to that, the importance of that. It clears drugs and alcohol. In fact, when we talk about drugs and we talked about the half-life of a drug. This is because that drug is moving through the liver, and the liver is removing the drug from the system.
7.67, 7.69 pints. That's what it said. So you just saw that.
That's pretty good there, Berman. Okay. It should be 6.7, I think.
There you go.
Right, 6.7,
Yeah. Okay.
Good. All right. Clears drugs. Okay, clears alcohol as well. So that's why when you consume alcohol, you don't stay drunk forever. That's because the liver removes that. Process of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a part of red blood cells. And so the liver, part of its function is keeping red blood cells produced and weeding out those blood cells that are old and you know, our blood cells have they live for about 3 months. And then afterwards, the body recycles the parts of the red blood cells. And that's important because as the body breaks down the red blood cells, that gets released into our system. And it's the job of the liver then to either keep or get rid of part of that recycled red blood cell. All right? Okay, conversion of ammonia to urea. Now, part of our cells' metabolism. So here we have a happy cell, okay? And this cell is happy. It's happy because it lives right by what is called a capillary. And this capillary is what is called fenestrated. It's got holes in it. And the function of the holes is so that nutrients, oxygen, water can come out and be absorbed by the cell. And then the cell can get rid of its waste products. And that goes back in here. And here we have carbon dioxide and ammonia. Now, yeah, that's ammonia. So we use ammonia in a lot of cleaning products. And it is powerful stuff. And if this stays in your system, it can do damage as if you just drank a cup of ammonia. So it's important that the body get rid of that. And what the liver does is that it changes this into what is called urea. And urea then is in the blood system, and then your kidneys can say, okay, I recognize that guy, and moves it out of your body. So when you're urinating, the yellow color of your urine is it's the urea. And so the urine, the root word of urine really comes from urea. And if you have had the pleasure of opening a toilet where the urine has sat there for a few days, okay, you're smelling, you get that ammonia smell. And in fact, they use, they said if you get it like a bee sting or get stung by a Portuguese man of war, if you're walking the beach, one of the things they tell you to do is for your buddy to go ahead and pee on your leg. And it's the ammonia that kind of offsets the poison in the Portuguese man of war. So my mother's from Hawaii, as most of you guys know, and so every 2 years we'd go back to visit our relatives, and at some point, one of us on the beach would get stung by Portuguese man of war. They wash up on the shore. It's kind of like a jellyfish with the long, stingy tentacles, and they'll wash up on the shore, and you'll see the like the head of the jellyfish, but the tentacles you can't see. They're kind of clear. And so even though you're not close to the head, you can still step on them. We always did. Stepped on the one of the tentacles, and then we'd be in excruciating pain for a while. Okay, it's very, very painful. All right. Okay. Okay, regulating blood clotting. Okay, we're going to talk about this again later on because as the liver becomes more damaged, a person is at risk for bleeding out if something traumatic will happen to them, because now the liver, which produces part of blood clotting. So if I cut myself here, the reason why I don't bleed to death is because we have properties in our blood that clog up the damage, and when these properties aren't enough, there's not enough in the system, then you continue to bleed. And so there is actually a genetic disease called hemophilia, where these people don't have the ability to clot their blood, and any small cut can literally bleed to death on even the smallest cut. Yeah, very serious stuff. That used to be called like a royalty or king's disease or something like that, because the upper noble people, they would all inbreed, and that disease would be spread among the noble royalties. Okay, helps the immune system, and the last one I have on there is that it clears bilirubin, which is released when blood cells are being recycled. So we'll get back to them, the manifestation of bilirubin. The manifestation of blood cells that are broken down in our body is bilirubin, and that gets excreted in our stool. In fact, the color of your stool is because of bilirubin. So when our liver is no longer able to clear the bilirubin, then the color of our stool changes. And that's one of the signs of liver damage, is the stool has a different color. Okay? All right. So Berman came up with, okay, so let's go, holds about 1 pint of blood, 13%. It's around, what is it, 6.7? Yeah, it's around 6.7 blood is in your circulatory system at any one time. Now remember, we also have, that's blood, right? We also have fluid within the cells themselves, and between the cells and vessels, there is fluid here as well. Okay, so a total of, let's see, I think we hold about 13. Don't quote me on that. Ask Google, she'll know, right? Don't ask Siri, okay? Siri doesn't know anything. Okay, I don't know how she got that job. But anyway, yeah, ask Google or Yahoo. All right, let's talk about the next slide, shall we? Okay. We're talking about hepatitis, correct? Okay, two-part word. We're going to split it around there. Hepa refers to the liver. In fact, the liver cells themselves are called hepatocytes. Have to refer to a liver cell. Now, itis refers to inflammation. And we've talked about itises before in our in-services. We have, what are some of the itises that you guys can think of?
Urethritis.
Urethritis.
We have them all muted, so
I don't think I spelled that right. You know, something about spelling on a chalkboard, you forget how to spell. Urethritis, yes. Again, inflammation, right? What else? Okay, I know you guys are racking your brain to think of other itises. But whenever you see this at the end, okay, it's a suffix. Coming at the end of a word, that means we're talking about inflammation. Now, inflammation means that the body is reacting in a certain way because there's something going on within that area of the body. And inflammation is just what it sounds like. There's something inflamed. And so what usually happens is that here's our happy cell, right? Here is our fenestrated capillary. And with it, maybe you got a cut, right? Because a cut or something else is going on. And we have a little, here's a sinister, let's say, bacteria, right? You got an evil grin on him. Let's see, how do I do evil grin? Okay, and he wants to, here's bacteria. All right, and he wants to take in the nutrients and the oxygen and all that stuff. And the body says, oh no, you know what? You don't belong here, we're gonna get rid of you. And so what the body does is that our cell says, hey, something's going on. Not happy. It sends out chemicals here, which alert the immune system and set out a very complicated series that is involved in inflammation, very complicated. But the end result is that this swells and the holes become bigger. That's why in an infection, usually there'll be some type of swelling. If you get a splinter in your skin, you'll notice it'll get red, it gets hot, and it begins to swell. And pain is involved as well, because what the body wants to tell you is that, hey, there's something going on here that you need to pay attention to. So these swell, and now the immune system, it's our Navy, our Army, it's our armed forces come to the rescue, and now the white blood cells here. Oh, we have another color. Here, let's go orange, okay? Our white blood cells that are, because they're big, can now squeeze through the hole. So now they squeeze through the hole, and then they come and they, what is called phagocytosis, is that they literally swallow, surround and swallow the bacteria. And then once it's inside, it sets out what is called lysosomes, and these digest this, the bacteria. And so that's one of the ways is that we get rid of an infection from a bacteria. Okay? So very important. Now, let me ask you this question. If in inflammation, let's say, okay, so you call the cops, right? They come to your house because there's something going on there. Well, what if the cops are always there, 24/7? Now, will that impede or disrupt the way that household runs? Well, yes. And the same thing with inflammation. If inflammation goes on too long, the military here in your body begins to do shenanigans within that area. So they'll start to attack a lot of times the body itself because they got nothing better to do, and because that's their job. So that's the problem with chronic inflammation. Is first of all, you have all these people hanging around, and they're impeding this cell's ability to function correctly. And then second of all, sometimes they start attacking the tissue. And we see this in autoimmune diseases of rheumatoid arthritis. What happens is that the inflammation, the immune system begins to attack the joints, the cartilage within the joint, and the cartilage is removed. So now you have bone on bone, and that causes the pain within the person. Okay, as an example. All right. Okay, the second part of the slide is that the cause of inflammation varies. Okay, so for the liver to be inflamed, inflammation, okay, that can come from different sources. One is a blunt strike to the liver itself. You can have this while you're playing sports, get in a car accident, fall in the tub, anything that usually goes under this way, or presses the ribs in such a way that it causes the trauma to the liver. Now, also I have their laceration. So in a car accident or some type of accident where the ribs themselves get crushed, well, the ribs can splinter off and lacerate the liver itself. Also, if you would get stabbed, if you got stabbed through either the rib or under into the liver, of course, that's going to cause trauma and resulting inflammation as well. Also, toxins. Drinking, like I just said, if you drink ammonia, okay, that's going to go through your body, that's going to go to your liver, and that's going to cause the liver to be damaged and begin to swell as well. Drugs can do that. I have here illicit drugs. They can cause that as well. Alcohol can cause inflammation of the liver, as well as medications. So some medications, as you know, they can affect the liver adversely. They can have a bad effect on the liver. And so with those type of drugs, your healthcare provider should be monitoring your blood work to make sure that your liver isn't being too adversely affected by the medication. Okay? As we're talking about today, viruses as well can cause inflammation and the immune system. So there are some genetic immune diseases that where the immune system attacks the liver itself. All right. Slide number 5. So what we're going to talk about today are 4 different types of hepatitis. Talking about hepatitis A, B, C, and alcohol. Okay. That's the medical term for alcohol. Okay, let's start with A. Hepatitis A is a transmittable disease caused by the hepatitis A virus. Now, this is, if you're going to get any of the hepatitis, this is the one to get because your body's going to clear this in about a week. It's short, it's acute. In other words, it comes on very quickly. It's usually short-termed, and it rarely results in any type of life-threatening or permanent damage to the liver. It's transmitted by fecal matter. So what happens is in our chain of infection, infectious agent is the hepatitis A virus. It's reservoired in feces. So once that feces comes out of the body, part of exit is when it exits the body. Now, mode of transmission is somehow it's got to get from the fecal matter into your mouth. Okay, and feces is for those who don't know that word, it's your excretion. It's when you go number 2. What comes out is your it's called feces. Okay, and you think, well, gosh, that doesn't happen very often. Fecal matter, and then you somehow ingest that. But folks, it happens much more frequently than you can imagine. When you flush the toilet, as example, you flush a toilet and small particles go up in the air, small water droplets, very, very small. And if you're in the bathroom with somebody who has hepatitis A, they flush that toilet, that goes up in the air, and you can actually breathe that in. Also, they touch the faucet, they touch the toilet roll, they touch the handle. So it's much more easier than you think to get an infection from somebody's feces. For the most part, our body does pretty well in getting rid of that those type of infections because it knows it, but sometimes it doesn't. Susceptible host, that's really almost any human being. The only human beings that cannot get hepatitis A are those that have been vaccinated or they've had hepatitis A before, okay? Symptoms are flu-like symptoms, fatigue, loose stools. Here's that clay-colored stool because now the the liver is inflamed. It's not processing correctly, and part of that is not taking the product of the broken down red cells out, and so your feces aren't brown like it should be. They turn a lighter color. They call it a clay color. So it's almost like a light gray in color, and it can be foamy as well. And that's because the fat isn't taken out. That's part of the liver's job as well. And so the fat gets transported into the feces, and when you go number 2, it can actually be kind of foamy as well. Okay. Your urine is tea colored. It changes from the yellow into a dark amber. And the jaundice of the eyes. So now the breakdown of the red blood cell products that should be excreted are now going in the circulatory system, and part of that is that it gets manifested in jaundice, which is kind of like a yellow coloring. And the yellow coloring can happen on the skin and the eyes as well. So that's how we know. Okay. This one is cleared from the body usually within a week or so. That person is now immune. But for those who haven't had hepatitis A, there is a vaccine for that. Okay? Pretty straightforward, hepatitis A. Let's move on to hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is also a communicable disease by the hepatitis B virus, which is different from hepatitis A. Now, all these viruses, what they have in common is that they attack the liver. That's what they have in common, but they are different types of viruses themselves. Hepatitis B can be both acute, that means it can act like hepatitis A, or it can be chronic. Most people who get exposed to hepatitis B will clear the virus from their system. There's a percentage that won't, and these are chronically infected with the hepatitis B virus. Now, a chronic infection of the hepatitis B, and we look a little later on to hepatitis C, is that they begin to cause inflammation, and they interfere with the function of the liver. And what happens is at this time there is no cure for hepatitis B. So the best somebody can do is, and the problem with it, there not being a cure, is that you're at risk for further damage of the liver, which can lead to cirrhosis and which can eventually lead to death. So the best we can do with hepatitis B, there are medications to take. Medications. If you're doing anything that is furthering the inflammation of the liver, then your healthcare provider will tell you to really stop doing it. Okay, whatever is damaging the liver. Now, what we want to do with hepatitis B is keep the viral load down, because when the viral load is down, it's less active, and it does less damage in your liver. And we keep it down in a couple of ways. One is medication, and one is monitoring your blood work, your urine work, those type of things, to actually see where you're at. But there are medications for hepatitis B. So let's see. Okay, and how is it spread? Well, we saw that with hepatitis A, it's spread through fecal matter. Hepatitis B is usually spread through direct contact, body fluids to body fluids. This can be drug use, sharing of needles, as an example. sex, unprotected anal, vaginal, and oral sex. Sometimes mother to baby, when that baby is being delivered. Sometimes it goes through the placenta as well. Not so common. It's usually within labor where the blood of the mother and the baby can be intermixed. Believe it or not, while the baby is within the mother, there is no exchange of blood at that time. That tends to happen when during labor. Symptoms are similar to that of the acute, the immediate manifestation of hepatitis B is similar to hepatitis A, but the chronic is similar, as we'll touch on later, to cirrhosis of the liver. Okay. The good news is that if you have not been exposed to hepatitis B, there is a vaccine for that. And I think you need a booster every 5 or 10 years for that. Okay, let's move on to hepatitis C. Is a transmittable disease, transmitted in a similar way as hepatitis B. The virus is Hep C, HCV it's called, and this also can be both acute and chronic. So you can be exposed to hepatitis C, and your body can clear that that virus. In fact, the majority of people do clear it, and you have a segment of the population that do not clear it, and they now have the chronic manifestation of hepatitis C. Similar to hepatitis B, long-term chronic infection can lead to cirrhosis and death. Now, up until a couple of years ago, hepatitis C was like hepatitis B in that there was no cure. They now have cures for hepatitis C, but it's contingent. In other words, there are certain conditions for someone to be cured of hepatitis C. One is hepatitis C has certain subtypes of the virus. So we have hepatitis C, but there's like variations of hepatitis C, and some of those variations on the medications can clear those variations, and some it can't. So it depends on which type of hepatitis C virus you have. Number one. Number two is that the drug regimen demands that the person be consistent with the taking of the medication. So if somebody is in active use of drugs or alcohol or some other type of behavior that will impede them, prevent them from taking their medication regularly, the healthcare provider probably will not administer that medication to that person. These medications are very expensive, and they require that the person take them when they're prescribed. So an active alcoholic, an active drug user, or any other type of behavior that has prevented that person from being regular with the medication before in the past, they're going to wait until either usually that person has some at least 6 months or so. I think it's 6 months of sobriety before they can qualify for that medication. They also will consider any other type of comorbidities, whether you have something else going on within the body, such as diabetes or something else that may prevent the medications from curing the the virus. Okay. Okay, and our last one is alcohol-induced hepatitis. Alcohol-induced hepatitis is not transmittable. So if somebody has a liver damage because of alcohol use, they can't transfer that to you. It usually results in long-term alcohol use. However, short binge drinking can also damage the liver, folks. In fact, people have died from alcohol poisoning by drinking heavily for a weekend. So it's just not limited to long-term use. In liver inflammation related to alcohol use, some extent of the damage can be reversed depending on when that when the person, and usually the cure for this is the person usually has to stop drinking, and they are administered nutrient supplements that the alcohol has depleted from the body. Sometimes these things can be reversed, like I said, and other times they cannot. Let's move on to number 7. Here's a picture of a healthy liver and a liver that has cirrhosis. As you can see, what happens is, just like when you get a deep cut on your arm, it's filled with scar tissue. And that's the same tissue that is used throughout the body. So when damage happens to an organ, it is filled with the scar tissue. Well, that scar tissue does not behave like the normal tissue. And so the more scar tissue that you have in the liver, the less active hematocytes you have, and therefore your body's ability to function the way it should be is compromised. So in slide number 8, you see manifestations of inflammation of the liver and chronic cirrhosis as well. So up in the corner, you see the yellowing of the eyes, spider-like blood vessels, itching, fluid buildup, mental confusion, and here you see a picture of what is called ascites there in the stomach, and other manifestations of that. And these are all because of what the function of the liver, once they get compromised, then the body behaves in a different way. And in the stomach here, it's because the liver cannot produce the proteins necessary in order to keep that fluid within the blood vessels, and so they leak out into the body. Okay, so that leaves us about 7 or so minutes. So let's go ahead and answer some questions that we have. Well,
They can unmic if they have a.
oh, you can unmic and then ask a question.
Yeah, Lisa, turn up some.
No question?
Hey, Luke, I have one.
Okay.
So, somebody close to me in my family years ago passed away from varices, as a result of years and years of drinking.
Yeah.
And it seemed like when that happened, there was just no going back. He ended up dying in a hospital about a week after he was admitted. Is this pretty typical with years and years of alcohol use?
Yeah, you're talking about esophageal varices?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. So Yeah, so what happens is in the liver, we have the liver here, right? And you have blood vessels going into the liver. This is your esophagus. Well, what happens, because there's damage here to the liver, the blood that goes in can't be processed as quickly as what the body needs it to do. So meanwhile, your heart is pumping at its regular rate. So what happens is that blood then begins to back up in this blood vessel that is connected to your esophagus. Now these blood vessels in your esophagus, they're very thin. And what happens is, this is called hypertension. What happens is that they begin to swell and they burst. So if anybody has ever known somebody who has thrown up because of their drinking and there's blood in the vomit, the blood is coming from here. Now this is very, very dangerous, because what happens if enough of these rupture, then blood gets all in your throat and moves into your lungs. So blood is pouring into here quicker than you can vomit it out. And what the person usually ends up doing is they end up drowning. They literally drowning in their own blood. Okay, this is what is called, this is an acute condition requiring 911 right away. If they don't catch it right away, most people die from this. And this is when the doctors say you literally cannot take another drink, it'll kill you. That's because this is what's going to happen.
Thanks, Luke. That's it. That's literally what the doctor said, and
Yeah.
it was yeah. And then it was like, thank you.
Yeah, and for chronic alcoholics, if they're not in any type of recovery, learning how to deal with the stresses of life, working through past trauma and past events, then honestly, the coping skills aren't there necessary for them to stay sober, and so. Usually they go back to, it's hard for them to stop drinking.
Any last questions?
Any last questions? Okay, so in conclusion, as you can see, the liver is very important, folks, for each one of you. And if there is if you had any history of this, it's very important that you develop the tools necessary in order to keep your body, your mind, and your spirit healthy, because it's all connected. And when one starts going south, it could pull the rest. And for some of you, going back into behavior that damage your liver can be a life-changing event for you. And the late stages manifestation of cirrhosis is very, very uncomfortable for the person. Okay, they're in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, and it's something to you really don't want to go down that road. Okay, I've seen it many times. Not pretty. All right.
Okay.
You guys are all awesome. Thank you.
Want to thank you for joining us. This is officially our first webinar from Latino Commission on the HEPs, A, B, and C, and alcohol. I just want to give you some information. So from this point, we'll send out a survey, since this is our first one and we're trying to work out all the kinks. We'll ask your experience of today's webinar. So please help us, be honest on it. if you had difficulties, please share that with us so that we can correct those. The other part is that now this is the first part of the webinar. The second part is a post quiz. And so we will be sending out a quiz to everyone that was on this morning. And so we'll ask you to fill that out, send it back in so that we're recording it, because this is the first of 3. And so we need to have 8 hours of infectious disease. So we did the first 4 hours already have been completed. And so this is the second half. And so as soon as we get those in, we'll register them together and send out your certificate.
It's
right?
recorded too, so they can watch it
And this
again.
is recorded,
You know,
so for those, I know that some had some difficulty. So they'll have the opportunity to look at it later. Or if you need to revisit it, then you'll have that, that'll be available to you also.
It'll be on Microsoft Stream.
So we'll make that available and give you instructions for that also. So I want to thank you very much this morning for joining us. We had a good participation rate, and so I'm excited about that. And in this new way of doing trainings and things, this is the beginning of a lot more to come. So thank you very much, and that I hope you have a good rest of your day, and bendiciones. Thank you.